of the life of Joseph. And we know that he went from a favored son to cast into a pit, sold into slavery by his brothers, taken into slavery into Egypt, falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, sent into prison, forgotten in prison by the butler and the baker. And finally, last week, we saw that he was promoted to Prime Minister of Egypt. So that was quite the journey that nobody could have foreseen. Quite the journey indeed. And from Genesis chapter 41 last week to Genesis chapter 45, are a few chapters in between, if your Bibles are numbered like mine are. And we're not going to go through all those chapters, but let me recap what happens in those chapters. Basically, the 7 years of plenty happen. Nothing happens in those chapters. Then the famine hits. And in the first 2 years of the famine, the brothers, Joseph's brothers from Canaan, come down into Egypt to buy grain. Now Joseph recognizes them, but they don't recognize him. And so he sends them on their way with some grain. They still don't know who he was. He comes back. They come back because the famine is still severe. And that's where we find ourselves in Genesis chapter 45. Now, I don't know if you like to watch these type of TV shows. We used to watch quite a few of them where they would take a house and they would rehab it. They would take some ugly house on the corner of nowhere, USA, and then rehab it and make it into something like a showplace. They would renovate it, restore it, and then at the end of the show, they would reveal it. Right? And that's what we're going to talk about this morning is the big reveal, because that was the climax. That was the pinnacle of the whole story. And I think this is for us the end of the series. It's not the end of Joseph's life by any stretch, but it is a pinnacle moment in his life in which we learn some things about Joseph and about God and about his brothers as well. There's something that, I don't know, anybody else like those type of shows, renovation shows, where they take something and restore it and renew it? And just the ladies? Oh, come on, guys. Don't leave me hanging here.
Can't raise my hands, she's told.
Okay. And I think there's just something that touches us on the inside because we like something that everybody would be willing to throw away or not pay much for, that is purchased and then brought back to a glory that nobody could have imagined. There's something that we want in our lives. There's something that we want in ourselves that is exhibited. It is a metaphor for what we want in our lives, and it is a metaphor for what we celebrate when we see God do. And we certainly see God do that in Joseph's life. Now, what we've learned over the past few weeks is there is indeed quite a bit of construction work that took place over the last few weeks, right? God was certainly making a masterpiece, but there were some messy parts to it. There were some things, as Brian alluded to this morning, that we would not want in our lives. And if we found them in our lives, we would try to get them out of our lives as quickly as possible. And yet, probably what we have seen, like I think Brian said also, that we see our lives in light of this story, and we see that there are times when we didn't know what in the world was going on. We didn't know how this has happened. We don't know the way forward. Everything seems so dark and the circumstances seem so confining that we seem bound to suffer in this place forever. And maybe, just maybe, we have seen some hope as we've seen Joseph go along. We've seen God intervene in his life while he was still in prison. We've seen God use him while he was still in the midst of a dark place. That's hope in and of itself. But this morning we're going to see, well, last week we saw where he was promoted to prime minister. Now that indeed is hopeful, to know that we can have a lifting up out of our situation, a lifting up out of the things that don't make any sense to where it starts to make sense. And we're going to continue to make sense as we go into chapter 45. The big reveal. Let's read verses 1 through 15. Now remember, the context is the brothers are standing in front of Joseph, coming back again for some grain. And Joseph has not led on just yet. He's not led on to who he is in this whole situation, although he's no doubt thought about this over the past few chapters. It says, "Then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, 'Make everyone go out from me.' So no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud. And the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard it. And then Joseph said to his brothers, 'I am Joseph. Does my father still live?' But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence." Underline that word, dismayed. "And Joseph said to his brothers, 'Please come near to me.' And so they came near. And then he said, 'I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years the famine has been in the land. And there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. And God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth, and to save your lives by great deliverance. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all of Egypt. Come down to me. Do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near to me, you and your children, your children's children, your flocks and your herds, and all that you have. There I will provide for you, lest you and your household and all that you have come to poverty, for there are still 5 years of famine. And behold, your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see that it is my mouth that speaks with you. So you shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt and all that you have seen, and you shall hurry and bring my father down here.' Then he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. And moreover, he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. And after that, his brothers talked with him." We're going to stop there. The big revelation. All the emotion leading up to this one point. And that's the first thing I see is the revelation, the big reveal, the revelation of Joseph's raw emotions. Can you imagine the first time he saw his brothers? All that he had forgotten about. All that had been suppressed. All that he had dealt with, he thought, probably came rushing back and reminded him of the situation that he thought he had gotten past. He was so overcome. He was so overwhelmed. Kind of like I was down here. I didn't plan on weeping in front of you. But when your emotion, when the sadness that is there but not evident comes up, it just comes out. Joseph wept so loudly. Can you imagine what the brothers were thinking? It must have got them a little concerned. First of all, before he says, "I am Joseph," he starts weeping and wailing so loud that Pharaoh's house and the people outside could hear this, wondering what's going on. Now you have these brothers who came in just to buy some grain, and all of a sudden this Egyptian official just breaks down and starts wailing. I mean, that's kind of awkward, don't you think? What are they going to do with this? What's going on here? He certainly had their attention whether he meant to or not. All this weeping and wailing. And then he reveals his raw emotion. He sends out the Egyptians that are his servants, right? He's second in command in all the land under Pharaoh. And he sends everybody else that's there to serve him out. And he stands there in all of his raw emotion, standing before his brothers, dealing with this one-on-one, not cloaking him in his position or his power or anything. but just say, this is surprise. Ta-da! The big reveal. Weren't expecting it. But here I am by myself, standing before you, and you're standing before me. Even though he had the authority, even though he had the position, even though he had all the accoutrements to his place and power, he didn't use any of that. He pushed it all aside, and he stood there in raw emotion before his brothers who had so grievously offended him. And he broke down. He broke down. Well, that reveals Joseph to his brothers. But what does it reveal about the brothers? What do they do now that he says, I am Joseph, the brother who you sold into slavery? Right? First he breaks down and he weeps. Certainly they weren't expecting that. It got their attention. Now he says, guess what? I'm Joseph, your brother whom you sold into slavery. And then we have the revelation of their shock. They are so beside themselves. They're so dumbfounded. I don't know what that word means, but it sounds like it fits. Right? They're struck dumb. Right? They can't speak. That word dismay, it says they were dismayed in his presence. Another translation is they were terrified. They have been called to account for their sin. They're standing before someone who can have them put to death, and probably should, based on their offense, based on their sin, based on how they treated him like a piece of trash, based on how they threw him away and treated him not worthy to be considered as they sat down for lunch. And not only was this a big, heavy truth laid in their lap, but now it was the moment. Now they're in need of grain. They came to have a need met, and now they have a greater need. How do we get out of this? And so they were terrified. You heard of fight or flight. You ever been so scared you just couldn't do anything or paralyzed by fear? I can imagine that's probably how they were. Speechless. Not only did they not know what to say, right? Not only could they not speak because of their shock. Not only did they not know what to say if they had gotten over the shock, what could they say? Oh, sorry about that. My bad. Right? I mean, what are you going to say to get yourself out of this, right? I mean, what could you possibly say to make that right? Nothing, right? So you are laid bare. So not only were Joseph's emotions laid bare, but your sin is laid bare before someone who can do something about that. A power and authority bigger than you, whom now you are, there is no way out, right? You have to deal with it. What do? Not only that, there's all these thoughts, all these emotions flooding and processing and all this fear. Now, Joseph says something else. Y'all come over here. I want to have a word, right? He says, come near to me. That's all he says, right? Can something good come out of this? What are you thinking at this point? What are you thinking when you have offended somebody so bad and now they can do something about it and you've been called on the carpet for your offense?
Execution.
What was that?
Execution.
Right. I mean, and they say, come up here. I want you to hear this, what I've got to say to you. I mean, your heart's got to be racing. The fear's got to be welling up inside of you. And then he says again, he reiterates, in case you didn't hear me, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery. Just in case you didn't hear me, and they're speechless. I mean, what can they say? What can they do? But there's where all these previous chapters come into play. You have the revelation of Joseph's character. You have the revelation of his character. Because they're waiting, no doubt, they're probably waiting for the other shoe to fall, for the hammer to drop, right? I mean, for justice to be wrought. Because they know, dead to rights, they're done, they're caught. And so they're on a razor's edge, just waiting for the next shoe to drop. But they don't hear what they probably expect to hear. They don't hear, guys, I have been waiting for this day. They don't hear that. They don't hear, you don't know what you did to me. You don't know how many years I've thought about this and how many years I have planned your demise because of what you did to me and how you made me feel. They didn't hear that. They didn't hear the shoe is on the other foot now and it's about to drop. None of that. Could he have said all that? Yes. Would we think those things at times? Yes, absolutely. What they do here, and this is part and parcel of the previous years. Now let me kind of get you caught up here. Joseph was 17 when he was sold into slavery by his brothers. He's around 40 years now. He's around 40 years old. So a lot of water under the bridge, a lot of time has passed. And a lot of time Joseph sat alone thinking about this. And no doubt trying to figure out how to process and how to go forward. Maybe you can't deal with your circumstances, but you can deal with the circumstances inside of you. And so what they finally hear is not a man who is filled with hatred and bitterness and anger and revenge. What they hear is somebody who says, look, I don't want you to be angry with yourself. You feel probably a lot of remorse at when you get caught doing something, and guess what? You're sorry. No doubt they felt sorry because they got caught, right? And I'm sure that they've spent the years processing the emotion too, and maybe most of them, if not all of them, second guessing that bad decision on that fateful day. Probably have gotten past it as well. But the penalty had not been taken care of, right? When you break the law, right, the law breaks you. Usually that's how it works. But Joseph, the law, in this case, doesn't say anything like he's going to break them. He says, look, I don't want you to be angry with yourselves. I don't want you to be angry because God sent me here. So in all those years of thinking about this and going over and over of this event in his head, he started to connect the dots, started to see that his place in time and his circumstances was not wholly separate from God's plan and purposes, but was indeed part and parcel of God's purposes and plans. And so he says to them, look, it's not you. God did this. And he did it for a good reason. And I see that good reason now. And so I don't want you to be filled with hatred. I don't want you to feel guilt and condemnation. All that guilt that maybe you have over all these years, it's done. I forgive you, and now you need to forgive yourself. All those years I've learned to let go. You know how forgiveness can be a process sometimes? Right? You feel that anger and you feel that hurt and that pain, and you choose to let go that moment, the offense that you felt. He says, I've looked at my life a lot closer lately. And I've learned that God is sovereign. He alone is the one who is directing my steps. He alone is the one that is in control of my outcomes, the outcomes of my life. He alone is God. And that's the last thing I want to say. the revelation of God's character. You know, let's not forget, this is history. This is his story, right? So Joseph would say, through all the years of asking the question why, trying to figure out what was going on, asking really with a desire and an intent and a heart to understand the heart of God, he showed me. James tells us this way: if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But believe, not doubting. Because if you doubt that God is sovereign, if you doubt that God's in control, if you doubt that God has power enough to steer your life through certain situations, if you doubt God is in your midst, you probably won't hear. You probably won't understand even if you did. And I always kept going back, he might say, I always kept going back to the dreams. The dreams that were God-given and how God has shown me dreams over the years. The butler and the baker, Pharaoh's dream, and how he gives these dreams and how he interprets these dreams. And I started to see these dreams unfold. And now I'm in a place, and now you're in a place where it all makes perfect sense. Right? Sometimes I was looking at my pain and I was looking at the moment instead of looking at the big picture of God's sovereignty. But now I see the tapestry that he had been weaving together. You know, that multicolored garment I had that Dad gave me, that grace, that rainbow in the sky, that grace that God gave Noah, right? It's on us. And this, although you meant it for evil, God meant it for good. It was grace. Although I didn't see it as, I wasn't comforted by it at the moment, but now I understand God's goodness. I am comforted by his goodness. God is good all the time. Even in this moment, God has revealed to me how it all fits together. They were not random things that happened to me, that you did to me, or somebody else did to me. They weren't random. They weren't part of chaos. They were part of order. Using chaos, no doubt. Using pain and difficulty, no doubt, but part of order. The order of an almighty sovereign God. And as he's revealed to me what's happened, I want to reveal to you what he's done. There's going to be 5 more years of famine. And I'm in a place to do something about it because he put me here. It's going to get worse, but he's throwing you a lifeline. He put me to be that lifeline. Now, I'm nothing of myself, but he's put me here to sustain you. He sent me. He sent me to save you. He sent me to feed you. Indeed, he sent me to save the world from famine. He sent me to save you, to deliverance. That's the God we serve. The one who understands who is the author and the finisher of our faith, who understands the beginning and the end, who is the Alpha and the Omega, the one who has written and understands the times and seasons of our being, the boundaries of our dwelling. This is the God we serve, and this is the God whom I trust, and this is the God who brings you here now. And I want you to see that, because don't get caught up in your emotions of guilt and condemnation. Don't get caught up in your worry about famine. God is sovereign, and he's doing something. Although you might not feel it, you might not see it, he's doing something. It's his plan, it's his wisdom, and it's been given to me, and through his wisdom, he has provided for us in a time of need, in a time of famine. He has sent me, but it is his provision. It is his plan for such a time as this. But you know, the story didn't stop there. He talked about the rest of the children of Israel and the seed that came forth through Israel. And his name is Jesus. See, Joseph's life is a pattern, is a type and shadow of Jesus.